One of the potential top candidates for the vacant offensive coordinator position for the Eagles was in the building yesterday, while another top candidate is taking his talents out west. We talk about it here on this episode of Eagles Latest. Thanks so much for joining us here today. I'm your host, Cory Nidoh, here on FanArch, and there was some news for the Eagles yesterday as their pursuit to hiring their newest offensive coordinator continues. Diana Rossini reported yesterday that Brian Daboll interviewed and was with the Philadelphia Eagles yesterday. And that is good news for the Philadelphia Eagles because I do think he could be atop the list for the team. And we talked about a little bit earlier in the week on what he can bring to the Eagles. Obviously, he has a really good relationship with Jalen Hurts. He was the offensive coordinator when Hurts was with Alabama. And I think a lot of people are putting a little too much stock into the fact that the two were together when Hurts was benched in that national championship game, because ultimately that decision had to come from Nick Saban. Now, maybe Daboll recommended it and said, hey, we got to put Tua in, but nonetheless, Jalen Hurts, if you read and hear what he says about Daboll, it does not seem like there are any hard feelings between the two. And he's also familiar with Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, and Nick Sirianni during their time with the Chiefs back in 2012. So Daboll could be the leading candidate now for the Philadelphia Eagles. I do still think that Buffalo Bills head coaching opening out of the blue with the shocking firing of Sean McDermott complicates things a little bit, because if Daboll wants to remain a head coach, he does obviously have connections up there in Buffalo and Western New York after spending some time as the OC and helping Josh Allen get back on track when Allen entered the league coming out of Wyoming. But Brian Daboll did have an interview with the Eagles, and you look at this list of candidates. Philadelphia mentioned they're going to throw a wide net out, right? They're going to try and get as many people in and see where they want to go, pick their brains. But I haven't really been that impressed with this list of candidates who have been interviewed so far. Now, that could obviously change if some bigger names end up coming up, or maybe they are starting to be in the mix with some other well-known names. But right now, I think Daboll is the clubhouse leader, in my opinion, for this position for the Eagles if they can wrangle him in. And I think it's even more important that they do so because news broke late last night that Mike McDaniel is going to more than likely be the new offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. I was going to come on and say how the Eagles haven't had an interview set up with McDaniel, which I thought was a little concerning. Diana Rossini also reported and mentioned that she doesn't believe that the Philadelphia Eagles are a very attractive destination for offensive coordinators because of the pressure and the quick turnover and the high demands that this position is going to entail, because they are going to be responsible to turn this offense around. Again, this is the highest paid offensive unit in the league, and they were average to below average nearly all season long. And Rossini believes that it's not as attractive as some may think. And maybe that was what Mike McDaniel thought as well. He's opting to go with Justin Herbert and the weapons out there in California. Obviously, McDaniel has a chance to go back out to Cali and work under Jim Harbaugh and figure out how they could get Justin Herbert over the hump and become a winning quarterback when it comes to the playoffs. So the Eagles seem like they have missed out on Mike McDaniel. Now, Adam Schefter did report that last night, and it was also reported that the Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did pursue McDaniel, but it did sound like the Buccaneers were really trying to get his attention, whereas the report didn't indicate as much for the Eagles. So maybe we will learn more as the next couple of days go by to see what kind of effort the Eagles put forth to try and land an interview with McDaniel. But we go back to it not being a destination for offensive coordinators. I want to push back a little bit on that because You still have some really talented players on offense. You have a GM that is willing to make whatever move is necessary to help the team. And you've got an owner that's not afraid to spend money. So I don't really agree with that in that regard. But I do agree and can see how some guys may not want to deal with that type of pressure. And I also said and believe that maybe Mike McDaniel can't handle the pressure in Philadelphia. And that's not a knock on Mike McDaniel, but you go from coaching down in Miami where, yeah, there's expectations, but not like what the Eagles are going through right now with this win now mode and window. And this media, these fans, they could get on a new face pretty quickly. We just saw it with Kevin Patullo. And maybe Mike McDaniel didn't see that as a positive, although they do have the resources, they have the skilled players, and they've got the infrastructure to continue to be a perennial Super Bowl contender. So Mike McDaniel is expected to be the new offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers, and to me that means that the Eagles need to get a deal done, I think, with Brian Daboll to be the new OC. Now, he's not going to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. His offense is ranked near dead last in the league in terms of preset motion, but I do think of all the candidates that they have interviewed so far, he still stands out to me because he does have a fiery personality. I think he can push Jalen Hurts. He can rely on his close relationship with Hurts to maybe get Jalen to play a little bit out of his comfort zone and convince him and give him confidence to do some of the things that he's limited in and kind of improve in those aspects of his game. So I do think that is an angle that could be beneficial for the Eagles if they were to sign Brian Daboll. Now, some offseason priorities here for the Eagles. There was an article out on ESPN going through different checklists for the teams that are already out of the playoffs. Obviously, there's only 4 teams left, so not a whole lot of teams remaining. But for the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously, there are some big check boxes that they need to mark off. And obviously, the top priority in this article was, of course, getting the offense back on track. We mentioned it's the highest paid offensive unit in the NFL, and they are just too good to be average to below average, and they just simply can't afford to repeat what they were offensively this season. The secondary priority that they mentioned, which I also agree with, is a pretty big one, and it's going to be more challenging, is how are they going to handle who they re-sign and don't re-sign, especially on the defensive side of the football, and there's some offensive pieces as well, but most notably Jalen Phillips and Nakobe Dean, 2 guys that made an impact on the defense. I think there's a chance that Phillips will re-sign with the Eagles. I don't know how much he's going to be looking for, but I do think Philadelphia might be willing to match whatever offer he is asking. Meanwhile, in the Nakobe Dean, it's going to be a tough one to let him go because not only does he bring a physical presence to the defense, but he's also a captain within that defense. He might not have a C on his jersey, but the younger guys look up to Nakobe Dean, and obviously all those Georgia guys in there, like they gravitate to Dean. And I think it's a tough decision. I think you can make a case that Nakobe Dean should be back, but also there's a case that the Eagles can make where they can't afford to bring him back because they have Jihad Campbell waiting in the wings, and they want him to be a full-time starter in his second season as a pro. Now, maybe Dean will take a team-friendly deal because he seems like he really wants to stay in Philadelphia, and then they'll have to figure out the linebacking core there. But as it stands, I do think Dean might be playing elsewhere. And then you've got Reed Blankenship as well, who I lean that he might be back. Howie Roseman doesn't really like to sign those middle-of-the-road type of players. Blankenship, a fantastic story, undrafted free agent, carved out a nice starting role at safety for Philadelphia. And it seemed like he and Cooper DeJean were pretty emotional after the game and loss against the Niners last week because they realized that it might be the last time that they play together as teammates here with the Eagles. But you also have some big decisions coming down the pike. Obviously, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith. Those are three guys who are looking for contract extensions on the defensive side. And Howie Roseman, he kind of alluded to it where, hey, we've made a lot of we put a lot of money into the offense. We put a lot of resources in, but now we have to try and do the same on the defensive side. And some of these decisions might look like they aren't lining up with the goals of building a team to win year in and year out, but that is at the forefront of the GM's mind, and he didn't want fans to forget that. So we'll have to see how things pan out as the offseason continues to march on, but right now those are some big check boxes. Obviously, getting the OC to right the ship, and of course, figuring out who they are going to re-sign on the defensive side of the football. Last but not least, I know this is kind of being getting monotonous here, getting just old, but again, it's A.J. Brown and the potential trade talks. Now, I'm in the camp that I don't believe the Eagles should trade A.J. Brown unless he comes out and tells the ownership and Howie Roseman, I am unhappy, I want out. And then you have to trade him. And that will be a shame because it was a really nice run here. A.J. Brown helped lead the Eagles to 2 Super Bowls. Of course, they won one last season, or I guess technically 2 seasons now in 2024. But there's evidence, and it's clear that A.J. Brown is unhappy with the situation. Now, is it personal with Jalen Hurts? I'm not sure. Hurts, who is very, very calculated in every word that he said after the loss and at the end of the season that he and AJ spoke and they're in a great place. And he did not mention anything about Kevin Patullo. So maybe Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown are on the same page, that they understand that KP was just over his head with the play calling and it just wasn't working out. Or maybe A.J. Brown just doesn't believe in Jalen Hurts anymore and he wants to go to a team that will feed him the ball consistently, because it is apparent that winning Super Bowls might not be the ultimate goal for the star wide receiver. We all remember what he posted 2 days after winning the Lombardi Trophy on Instagram. Paraphrasing here, but he essentially said that he thought that winning a Super Bowl would scratch that itch and fulfill him, and he realized that dominating the competition is what really fuels him and gets him going. So the trade prediction piece on ESPN has A.J. Brown going to the Buffalo Bills. It is a pretty natural fit. Obviously, the Bills do not have an alpha wide receiver. They were rolling with a cast of middle-of-the-road wideouts with Khalil Shakir. They signed Brandon Cooks off the street. Keon Coleman had an up-and-down year. He was a healthy scratch a couple of times, dealing with some personal issues, some, I don't want to say punishment, but some team punishment handed down by the Bills, and it just hasn't worked out. And again, it's probably another reason why the Bills fell short. Now, I'm not discrediting Josh Allen and not letting him off the hook, because he did turn the ball over way too many times in that game against Denver. But you picture A.J. Brown and Josh Allen together, well, that's a pretty solid and scary duo. So we will see what exactly happens. I'm in the belief that they have to put the ball on A.J. Brown's court. Again, if he comes out and says, hey, I'm just not happy here, guys. I gave it my all. I tried. I just want a change of scenery. Well, then Howie Roseman's going to have to make that deal. And he's going to have to decide when to make that deal. Obviously, it would be a lot cheaper and a lot easier to move A.J. Brown after June 1st. If they do so, they can actually save $7 million in cap by trading him after that June 1st designation. And the Eagles have never been scared to make a move due to salary cap implications. So it's not that it's completely out of the question, and it would kind of come down to, do the Eagles want to spread out that $43 million cap hit over 2 years, or just rip the Band-Aid off and deal with it next season? So we'll see what transpires. Obviously, Howie Roseman said that he is trying to find players like A.J. Brown, not trade them away. I think that the Eagles are way better offensively with A.J. Brown on this offense than without. But if push comes to shove and Brown vocalizes that he's just unhappy and can't get over the fact that the offense still might struggle, whether it's because of Jalen Hurts, whether it's because of the play calling. If it's Nick Sirianni's offense that is still implemented for the most part, well then the Eagles are going to have to make a very tough decision and start to game plan on who to draft or potentially sign or trade for to try and replace the production of a perennial 1,000-yard receiver. But that's just some food for thought. Let me know your thoughts. Should they trade A.J. Brown? Should they sign Brian Daboll with the news that Mike McDaniel is heading to Los Angeles? Or is there another candidate out there like Joe Brady who might be able to swoop in and wow the Eagles if they can get him in the building and become the new offensive coordinator? As always, thanks so much for watching and tuning in. Please, again, subscribe, drop a like, and drop that comment. Let me know your thoughts on how the offseason is going for the Eagles, what you like, what you don't like. What do you think they should do here as it continues to march on? We'll talk to you tomorrow, and as always, thanks so much for watching Eagles Latest.